Welcome back to the Warehouse Podcast. I'm Tyler.
I'm Jesse.
And I'm Eli.
And guys, we're in the same room together.
The same exact room. Not the same zip code, not the same country.
It is the same zip code and the same country.
Right.
But
yeah,
the same room.
More specifically, yes. Right.
We'll be able to cut each other off and stuff.
Right, exactly. I was going to say not just or not only the same country or the same state.
Right.
I think we all
So
understood.
that's kind of
we
how
all
I'm thinking
understood,
about
for
it.
sure.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, the listeners know that now.
Got you. Right.
But yeah, it took us a while to figure out the recording setup. We're currently recording on 3 separate computers and 3 separate microphones. So this is going to be a bit of a problem to edit, but it's worth it to be together with each other.
But what matters is it's Tyler's problem to edit.
That's true.
And Jesse and I are going to go home and have a great night.
Tyler kind of has a lot of problems. He's trying to make sure his kid doesn't wake up. He's holding the baby. He's multitasking. We're trying to, make sure this rain doesn't interfere with our audio too much in the background. So there's a lot Tyler is trying to balance right now. Yeah, so I came over here and I was thinking we were going to video record, and I wore this orange shirt for the Orioles.
But
now, the thing is, it's not an Orioles shirt, and I feel like subconsciously I was kind of I couldn't give a full Orioles endorsement this week just because of we didn't have a single win this week, but I still wanted to support and wear some orange. But,
so what is it you have on there? What is that?
It's a shirt from undergrad, so it's like an essay production, student association production shirt.
Okay,
so
literally nothing to do with baseball.
Oh no, nothing. Okay. It's orange.
It is orange.
Part of it also was I didn't have any clean Orioles shirts available, so that was part of the problem too. Yeah. It was a combination of several things here. So,
and we did contemplate recording video for this, but it wasn't working out, and we've decided to go just audio this week. But it'll still be on YouTube, just in audio form.
It would have been strange to be on a Zoom session all in the same room.
Well, that's what we tried to do.
Yes.
So pull back the curtain a little bit.
Yeah, right.
And the internet wasn't having it, and
it did not go well.
No.
Yeah.
Not at all. Okay, well, and Eli, it's nice to have you up from Florida.
It's good to be here. Tyler, I had not seen you in person since you got married. What is it, a year and a half ago?
Yeah, it was September of 2019, so pre-pandemic days.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So you hadn't seen him in person, but you saw the baby somehow?
I must have seen you in person since then.
I don't think so. You've seen the baby. You've seen him on camera a couple
Maybe
times.
I've just seen him on camera 37 times.
How do you
feel like I met this baby?
Whether you met the baby or not? Okay, that's fine.
I'm a pretty bad friend. That's how.
It's a look.
I have no explanation.
This last year has been tough on all of us.
That's true.
Okay,
that's true.
We're all vaccinated now. We're getting back to normal, and now Eli has held the baby. He's met the baby, and all is right with the world.
I think the baby likes me too. Yeah. I got a smile pretty early on. We crawled around on the floor a little bit. He did some baby things. He tried to steal some pizza and some Coke from me. For the record, that's Coca-Cola. Yes, Coca-Cola.
And decaffeinated at that.
And decaffeinated. So the baby was not at risk of any overdose.
Okay.
Or anything of the sort.
Yeah, and having Eli and me here at the same time, we're really testing the baby's facial recognition abilities.
It's true. You look very similar.
Yeah, so that's kind of an interesting dynamic for the baby to be able to explore.
Yeah, we're furthering the cognitive abilities of Tyler's child.
Yes.
We're here as an evaluation committee almost.
Right.
Yes.
Determine if your child is going to be an approximate IQ.
I mean, I don't know what qualifications you have for that, but I appreciate you making the effort. So thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Of course. We do it for you.
Okay, well, this is an Orioles podcast, so we should probably talk a little baseball. We're a couple minutes in here, but as Jesse alluded to, the Orioles have not won a single baseball game since the last time we recorded an episode, which was a week ago. So it's feeling pretty bad around these parts. I don't know, guys, if you have anything to say there, but they've got swept by the Nationals, swept by the Twins, and they've lost the first game of the White Sox series. We're currently recording this during the rain delay prior to Game 2, but I don't know. How are we feeling?
I mean, the rain might save the Orioles tonight.
That's true.
So that's definitely a possibility. Yeah, I mean, we've lost 10 in a row. Nothing is going well right now. I mean, the Orioles are just an absolute disaster right now. And, I mean, I'm not sure whether we're doing a silver lining segment tonight, but if we are, it was a real struggle to come up with a silver lining.
I mean, John Means had a good start.
Yeah.
But
I think the real silver lining is all the stuff we're going to say about the minor leagues.
Yeah,
There's true. No major league silver lining. The silver lining is the future.
And even the John Means start, it was probably like for this year a subpar John Means start.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it wasn't even for his standard this year. It
was still a start. I think most teams probably win because he was pretty good. But these Orioles are not most teams,
right?
But not the worst losing streak in baseball at the moment. The Arizona Diamondbacks have lost 11 games in a row as we record.
The trade-off.
Thank goodness they started one day before us, right?
That's true.
The trade-off, of course, is that we have the worst record.
That's true.
So they get the worst losing streak, and we get the worst record.
So bring on that number 1 pick, baby.
I know. Well, that's kind of the opposite side of it. Is like there is sort of an upside. I don't know if there is an obvious number 1 pick for next year's draft yet, but that's nice. One more top 100 type of prospect at least.
Yeah, I mean, Elias will be excited when he gets around to draft time next year, but he's not going to enjoy the process.
No, and I think he'd probably be even surprised at how bad the team has been this year. We maybe got spoiled a little bit in April with a team that was somewhat competent, and now we're kind of seeing. I think this is an overcorrection of awfulness. I don't think the Orioles are this bad, but it's not too surprising either, given the pitching situation coming into the year and where we're at and all the injuries. Not too surprising.
We'll have to reevaluate this as we move forward in the season and assess whether we have sort of an updated prediction as to our win total by the end of the year.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of cheating, though, because then you've got so much information to go off of.
Oh, of course,
well,
but...
I mean, I think we could maybe be like, will we be judging it against, like, 2019 or 2018? You know what I mean? Like, 2018 was the 47-win team. 2019 was a step forward, Hopefully we're closer to that 2019 range than 2018. That's what I'll say.
To be determined.
Yeah. But speaking of injuries, Austin Hayes is back on the injured list. Doesn't seem like he's going to be there for very long, hopefully, but this is his second hamstring strain of the season. Kind of lather, rinse, repeat with Austin Hayes on the injury bug, right?
Yeah.
It's worrisome. Like, he's really good, but he just can't stay on the field.
Something that I will throw out here is, the Orioles got in a situation where we only had one guy on the bench as a result of this Hayes injury, as a result of Ryan Mountcastle being hit on the hand, and as a result of, I think it was Severino who was struggling.
Uh-huh.
And so I think this partially may be just to have some roster flexibility. Trey Mancini got hit in the elbow also, so he's going to be down for a couple days. And it seemed like they were willing to wait this out for a couple days initially. He had been sitting on the bench since the 24th and just got put on the IL today, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that gives me some confidence that this might not be a very serious injury. And he was the one who just had to get pushed. We do have outfielders without him, and it made most sense to shut him down for 10 days as opposed to Mountcastle with his hand, as opposed to Mancini with his elbow, etc. So it might have been more about roster flexibility than him truly needing 10 days. And with how injury prone he has been, you might as well give him the 10 days and make sure he's fine before he comes back.
Well, in addition to that, you could get it retroactively. So, for the first few days that he was injured.
Yeah, so this is retroactive to the 24th. And today we're speaking on the 28th. So, he's already about halfway through this time on the IL. And it's a minimal impact thing to me, except we were able to bring up Ryan McKenna. Now we have an extra bat off the bench, an extra guy to pinch run, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it was more about roster flexibility than anything.
So Nathan Ruiz from the Baltimore Sun tweeted out something interesting yesterday. He said, when the Orioles record when Trey Mancini, Cedric Mullins, Austin Hayes, Anthony Santander, and Ryan Mountcastle are all in the starting lineup is 3-0. But those are the only 3 games.
3 games.
It was the opening sweep in Boston. Those are the only 3 games this season that 5 of those guys are in the lineup at the same time. Because Santander's back now, and then Hayes gets hurt. Like, the Orioles are bad, but when their best players play, they're not that bad. So it's just another frustrating.
It's a very small sample size, though.
It is, but think of all of their individual performances. Mountcastle's probably been the worst of the bunch there, and you would think he's got nowhere to go but up. It's frustrating.
Our lineup would definitely have a different outlook if all of those guys were healthy at the same time. I mean, for 1 through 6 in the order would be a complete different makeup than what we have right now.
This is how he's getting to this. I knew what he was doing.
No, I thought about making this point, but I didn't say it. But yes,
you have to have your chance to gloat. We will readily give it.
For everyone who is a little confused about what just happened, I made a prediction a couple weeks ago on the podcast, or a few weeks ago on the podcast.
Probably almost a month ago, but yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of more or less shot down by my co-host.
Not even. We ridiculed him. Yeah. Admittedly ridiculed.
And you afterwards were like, that was dumb. I shouldn't have said that.
You guys looked at me like I had 7 heads, and
Jesse was like, I just want to make sure I'm not putting bad takes out there for the podcast.
What was the take?
So the take was that at some point in the season, for at least a few games, I thought Freddie Galvis would hit second in the lineup. Now, I was shocked that he hit 4th in the lineup for a few games. That is more like distressing to me, I feel like, than him hitting second. But yeah, Galvis did, and he got up there a lot earlier than I expected him to, admittedly. But he's one of the hotter hitters on the Orioles team right now. And, with everybody injured, with so many of our hitters not performing right now, that's how he got up there.
But so now, in the 5 games he's batted second, he has a 565 OPS. So kind of what we said would happen is you move him up, the numbers aren't going to be as good because now pitchers are going to be bearing down a little bit on him. So
and of course they're going to look at the lineup and say, this is the guy we need to get out because we can't pitch to Mancini behind him, or we don't want to pitch to him with a guy on. So
exactly.
So I mean, definitely. I didn't say he was going to produce that great when he was hitting to, but I thought he would. I thought he would get up there. But in any case, I got a little lost on the point I was making. But just
the depth of the line,
right? So exactly. The lineup is a lot deeper when we have those 6 guys in the lineup. When we have that, then Freddie Galvis hits somewhere more like 7 or 8 or even 9 in the lineup. When all of those guys are available, it's just that the lineup looks so bleak and so thin when Franco and Mountcastle don't hit, and then we have a couple more injuries at the top of the lineup. In addition to that, I mean, the lineup just looks very, very dismal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's been kind of the problem all year long. Is it's injuries apart from like Cedric Mullins. Everybody else has pretty much had injury issues. That everybody else, it's like you care about. Sorry, Michael Franco, but pretty much everybody else.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll say about this Hayes injury is, I mean, it really is frustrating. It must be even more frustrating for him. But the Austin Hayes health, I think, needs to be the number one priority. In terms of Austin Hayes, his health needs to be the Orioles' number one priority. So they need to do whatever they need to do to be able to make sure that he plays. And whether he needs an extra off day more often, whether he needs an extended routine coming into the ballpark, whatever it is he needs, the Orioles need to make this their mission to figure out with him. Because, and just to be clear, it should be the Orioles' number one mission with Austin Hayes, not necessarily with the entire team.
Well, and I wonder even because it's another hamstring injury, was he totally recovered from the last one? Like Ryan McKenna is capable enough. Let him just keep Ryan McKenna up. Get Austin Hayes back. If he's got to be out a month, he's got to be out a month. Like,
why rush anything?
Right.
Why force anything? Yeah, I mean, no, that makes complete sense. I mean, he definitely has the talent. Of course, we want him to be getting experience playing and getting every opportunity to get as many at-bats under his belt, etc. But this is a guy definitely where his health needs to come first.
For sure. Some other kind of negative news. It's kind of a theme this week on the Major League side of things. Dean Kramer struggled again. He's been sent down to Norfolk. I think this is the second time he's been demoted this year. Eli, you were kind of breaking down to us before we started recording sort of what your thoughts were about Kramer. I mean, do you want to share those with the public?
I heard Brandon Hyde talking, and he did mention that he really likes all four of Kramer's pitches nowadays. The fastball, curveball, cutter, change mix. And really, I have to agree. I think that everything passes the eye test. His stuff looks electric. And that's kind of what we've always talked about with Dean Kramer. The year he got traded over from the Dodgers, he led the minor leagues in strikeouts. He has always been a guy, whose stuff plays. It's just whether he can help himself by just commanding it well. It's whether he, can avoid throwing a cutter, like that isn't a front door truly like going from the hip to the inside corner, but instead it ends up inside corner to middle of the plate. But, I just out of curiosity, as I was prepping for this, I looked up the Baseball Savant page naturally, and everything about his pitches has gotten better this year in terms of the movement on them, in terms of the profile. His curveball has added like almost a full inch of extra drop. I'm not going to go through every individual pitch, but the case in point, like his stuff is moving well, and I think this is probably a situation where he went into the lab this year, has worked really hard on understanding what he needs to do to get an extra little bit of action on each one, and in his mindset, he's working so hard on making sure that each pitch is up to par that he's having a harder time commanding it. If you're thinking about your fingers rolling over the top of the ball and the curveball, you're not thinking about that release point quite as much. It's just where his mindset is in improving his stuff. I think he's just losing his command a little bit. We saw kind of a similar thing with John Means at the beginning of last year. He started coming out throwing 96 in early 2020. And we were all really amazed by it. I was really excited by it. I did the exact same thing. I brought up the Baseball Savant page, and I was talking. And John Means obviously had that famous talk with Brandon Hyde, had to bring himself down emotionally a little bit and start pitching within himself. So I'm very anxious to see if Dean Kramer will do the same thing. I think a trip down to Norfolk is good for him. He's got options left, so we can do this as much as we want this year. And it won't do him any harm, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, this is how it goes for young pitchers earlier in their career. I was kind of saying before that Kramer's kind of the one pitcher that I've sort of been disappointed with this year just because, I didn't expect that much out of Matt Harvey. I think he was better than expected earlier in the year. Jorge Lopez, we've all kind of had our say there. Obviously, John Means has been great. Kramer's kind of the one that you were hoping he would show a little bit. I'm not expecting ace stuff, but if he could be like a 4.5 ERA type guy to be like, oh yeah, here's a dude we can probably put at the back of the rotation for a few years, kind of hold down the fort, and he hasn't really done that. But like you said, Eli, it could just be a release point thing, kind of figuring some stuff out, getting back in the lab, taking a step back, going down to the AAA and taking the pressure off and kind of figuring some stuff out. I'm not panicked yet, but certainly not ecstatic about the performance so far.
Yeah, the thing I would say is just that, I think it's really important for Oriole fans to keep in mind this is a guy who's had 13 Major League starts. He's pitched in 13 Major League Baseball games. Like you were saying, Tyler, for young pitchers, this is definitely a process coming into the Major Leagues. Unless you're, drafted in the first round or something like that. Most pitchers, I would say, don't come into Major League Baseball and just permanently stay there indefinitely without going up and down a little bit before you finally find some stability in the major leagues. So his trajectory isn't being infringed upon, or nobody should have any alarms about his performance so far. Like Eli was saying, he does have really good stuff. There is a lot about Dean Kramer to be really excited about in terms of his velocity, his movement. It's just really about what it comes down to for him is his command and whether he's going to be able to have enough command in the majors to be an effective pitcher. I mean, to me, he seems like one of the guys who can have a very good major league career just kind of being one of these effectively wild pitchers. But it's kind of more important for him to try to find a way to at least stay wildly effective, at least in zones of the plate and stuff like that. And not be throwing the feet, not be pitching the ball 3 feet across the plate, not be throwing inside when you're trying to get outside. When you're trying to throw a pitch on the outside corner, either have it be a ball on the outside corner or be dotted on the corner and not coming back across the plate, that kind of thing. So the command is definitely the thing he needs to kind of focus on. But that is definitely the pitching staff definitely has their eye on this. The organization knows exactly where he needs to go and what adjustments he needs to make. So I'm definitely not overly depressed about him. It'd just be nice if he was pitching a little better. And one of the other frustrating things was it not anything long term. I definitely didn't think, he figured it all out and he's going to be great now. But he did have a couple starts where he did pitch really well and had 6 innings and 1 run, or that kind of thing. But it only lasted a couple starts or 3 starts or something like that, and then he immediately kind of regressed to what he had been doing before. So that's kind of, like Tyler was saying, that's kind of the life of a young pitcher, especially a young pitcher in Dean Kramer's kind of situation, not a first-round draft pick or anything like that, not a top 100 prospect. But but hopefully he'll be able to make some improvements going forward and kind of be a more durable 4 or 5 starter in the rotation.
Yeah, I think Eli's comparison kind of like to the John Means situation where, John Means was throwing harder last year, wasn't as effective, pulled it back, got more effective. Kramer could be a similar situation. Not that he's throwing 95, 96, but, like I was looking at Baseball Savant a second ago, like his fastballs, he's like in the middle of the zone all the time. I mean, you don't throw 100 miles an hour, you're going to get smacked around. So you got to nibble a little bit more often. So maybe that's something you can go back and be like, chill out, maybe throw 90, 91 and do some Greg Maddux stuff.
Which that's kind of the tough thing for pitchers too, is because they're trying to get ahead in the count. They don't want to get behind hitters. But then when they attack the strike zone, then they get hit.
Certainly easier said than done.
Right. So it's definitely that's part of learning how to pitch, is trying to find that balance between attacking the strike zone and then not being stupid.
Yeah. And now we get to see Keegan Aiken start this weekend, which, I think opinions on him have changed over the last year. I don't think he's as exciting as maybe he once was. But, I'm excited to see a young guy, get another chance to start after kind of pitching in a weird relief role for a little while here. So excited about that. Unfortunately, more negative news. Ryan Mountcastle and Trey Mancini are both currently day-to-day with a couple of injuries. Neither one of them is going on the IL. However, and I guess this is kind of coinciding with that, Tyler Nevin has been called up. Like I said, neither one of them is going on the IL, but Nevin, somebody needs to play first base, and Nevin is the guy. Are you guys at all concerned about the Mountcastle and Mancini injuries, Jesse?
Not really long term, but I am in the short term, yes. And the reason is because the Orioles are not playing well right now. We've lost so many games. We've lost 10 in a row, as we've stated. And the thing that's frustrating is this is just going to further demoralize an already frustrated baseball team. And that's kind of the thing, is in the short term, I'm kind of worried that I don't think we're going to lose 30 in a row, but I think we might continue to play bad baseball for a while.
Well, and Mancini was really playing well. Mancini was legitimately being one of the best hitters in baseball the last 2 weeks or so.
Yeah, he was basically the heart of our lineup, and we were relying on him for the little production this Orioles offense was producing. So yeah, no, I mean it's definitely a blow that the Orioles are going to have to try to deal with. I just don't know how much the Orioles are really in a position to bounce back from a situation like this in the short term.
Yeah. Well, Eli, what do you think about maybe Tyler Nevin coming up, though? Is that exciting at all for you?
I mean, it's moderately exciting. You know, he's got a pedigree. He's the son of a famous baseball player, moderately famous. You know, he can handle the bat. I think it'll be cool to see him. I'm glad he's getting an opportunity. I think that Mountcastle is going to be the first baseman of the future. I don't think that Nevin will really factor in, but he's definitely got some potential with the bat, so we'll see what he can do. And I think that Mountcastle and Mancini will be back in a couple days. They said that Mountcastle's already swinging the bat, is potentially available off the bench. I just saw, actually, tonight's game is postponed. They're going to play a doubleheader tomorrow. So that's an extra day of rest for Mountcastle. I expect him to be back.
Yeah. For those that maybe don't remember, Tyler Nevin, great first name, I gotta say, but he's one of the guys that What's that?
We're a loser.
He's one of the guys the Orioles got from the Colorado Rockies in exchange for Michael Givens. He came over with Terran Vavra, who we'll be talking about a little bit later on. More minor league related news. Hunter Harvey continues his rehab with the Norfolk Tides. He's been throwing a bit. He's not really looking like Hunter Harvey. He's not striking out a ton of guys, but
he was off for about 2 months, though. So
that's true. So, and the velos, I don't know what the velos are. I'm sure they're down quite a bit in early rehab. But, you know, what about the return of Harvey, Eli? You think that's going to provide a necessary boost to this Orioles bullpen that's been a bit depleted lately?
Yeah, you look at the stabilizing force of the Orioles bullpen last year with Cesar Valdez, Tanner Scott, Dylan Tate. You know, the back end of that bullpen. Dylan Tate has been hurt. He's just coming back. Valdez has been outright terrible. Tanner Scott has no idea where the ball's going. I think that if there was one point on this team that we could inject some stability, it would be to the back end of the bullpen. I don't know. I mean, I say that because the starting rotation was expected to be terrible, and it is terrible, so I'm not considering that a big loss right now. The bullpen's the loss because we expected it to be pretty good.
Decent, yeah.
And so Hunter Harvey, getting him back will be really nice.
And we've been so complimentary of the back end of this bullpen so far on this podcast, and they've really done a good job for the most part. In hindsight, now that especially we're seeing everything that we're seeing, we should have known that this may not have been as locked down as maybe we had presented it before. I mean, Cesar Valdez, definitely, I have a lot of respect for him and how he pitches and everything. But this is a guy that relies upon pitches under 85 miles an hour pretty routinely. And there's always, especially with his command at times, there was always a potential for him to implode, let alone our history that we have with Tanner Scott. And we know how wild he can be at times, despite the progress that he had seemed to have made in recent months. And then in Dylan Tate, of course, definitely a guy with a ton of talent, but also a guy who has had injuries in the past and who has had some problems just performing at certain moments in his career too. So, I guess it hasn't been as locked down. But in terms of Harvey, I mean, if he could get back, I mean, this is a potential closer piece for the Orioles.
Right.
So with Valdez struggling, this is somebody who could either potentially long-term kind of take over that role if necessary.
Yeah, I mean, the bullpen's kind of an interesting beast because they were so good, and then it was almost like in unison, they all started struggling at the same time. Valdez has been the worst of the bunch probably, but Plutko's been not nearly as good as he was. Tanner Scott's gone walk crazy. Paul Fry's still been solid, but not as good as he was. It's just like been a whole group in unison that hopefully at least a few of them figure it out. Cesar Valdez, though, I am legitimately worried he could be like on a slippery slope downward.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't know about that. I mean, I think the Orioles will try to do some things to fix him. I mean, he showed last year that he is probably a capable bullpen pitcher. So I think the Orioles aren't going to immediately give up on him.
Not the closer anymore, though. They did remove him from that.
Right, yes. But I forgot where I was going with that.
I'll jump in.
I'll edit it.
Yeah. I'm really not so sure I agree that Valdez is a capable bullpen guy. And the reason I say it, we were chatting before the podcast, and somebody compared him to a knuckleballer. And that's almost what it feels like. It feels like a little bit of a gimmick. You know, we all loved the dead fish. It was a huge thing. It was hilarious. But, you know, he's at a point where he's throwing these changeups 75 miles an hour. You know, he's so wild. It's like incomprehensibly wild throwing this slow. He's throwing pitches 3-4 feet outside the zone. He's got Severino diving all over the place. And Severino can't catch the ball anyways. So it's infuriating. And then, you know, finally he throws one over the plate and it's still 75 miles an hour no matter how much it dives. And, you know, an MLB hitter is going to tee off on that. So, I believe that I've been saying this for a couple weeks now. I think that if he ups his usage of his fastball and slider, you know, like I think he throws his changeup about 75% of the time right now. I think if he drops that down to 60, you know, it's still a primary pitch. It's still an effective pitch. But right now, they just don't sit on anything else. There's no reason for a hitter to consider anything else up there.
Right. And to your point, I mean, this is a guy who has to rely on keeping hitters off balance. In order to have any sort of effectiveness in Major League Baseball, if you throw under 80 miles an hour pretty routinely, you have to keep hitters off balance. And yeah, the fact that hitters can just sit on this changeup is a giant problem. Just for a little bit of context, I mean, just a couple weeks ago, now ERA definitely can easily get inflated in just a few bad outings for a closer, just because, especially at this point in the season, the number of innings for a closer isn't going to be very great. So one bad outing can definitely ruin things. But just a couple of weeks ago, Valdez had an ERA under 1 or under 2.
Yeah.
And now it's totally imploded. It's over 5. And, it's not as pretty a number to look at on the stat sheet.
Yeah, you know, Valdez is an older guy, but he's not a 36-year-old guy with a decade plus of big league experience. You've kind of got to change your mindset to like a guy that's in his first or second year sort of in the big leagues. Like, okay, I had this one trick that was really good, and now they've kind of figured it out. I've got to adjust to it a little bit.
Exactly.
He's definitely more of a wild card in terms of like what he will be, or basically, will he be able to make this adjustment that he needs to make in order to continue to be effective in Major League Baseball? But yeah, I mean, I think also, just to underscore your point, I think that is a really important point, is that part of this, part of it is him imploding, part of it is his command, part of it might be just the league adjusting and figuring it out a little bit. Yeah, I think it absolutely
is. He's been throwing one pitch for, you know, like the entirety of the 60-game season last year, and you know, he came out doing it again, and it was effective. And then they're like, "Oh wait, that's all you're gonna throw? Right. Yeah, I can do that. You know, sure, throw it again."
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, the Orioles are in a good position, at least right now, to kind of try some things still. Like, okay, Cesar, you've had hit a speed bump here. We can still kind of go forward for a little bit, but you know, there does become a time where you got to kind of balance competitiveness with, you know, putting some experiments out there. And I don't think we're quite there yet, but there are definitely some warning signs.
Yeah, and also, I mean, just he is a curious. I mean, from a on paper perspective, he is a curious choice for a closer role. So the fact that he's being, you know, at least temporarily removed from the closer role isn't the worst thing in the world. So, hopefully he'll be able to figure it out. Maybe, I mean, he seems like he's pretty good under pressure to me, at least. I mean, he does absolutely implode, but But he also does seem to get out of a lot of like
Yeah.
really tough jams and figure things out. So it is kind of an interesting thing. But yeah, maybe like some, he can kind of, as Eli says, go to the lab and try to figure things out.
Get some
a
low
little
leverage
bit.
situations.
Right? Kind of do how our Rule 5 guys normally pitch in those sorts of situations.
Speaking of the Rule 5 guys, that's about to get more complicated here because Max Scaroller is rehabbing with AAA Norfolk. His is not going so well either, but I would assume he will be back in Baltimore at some point. That's going to make there be a little bit of a roster squeeze. Scaroller, Wells, who's also struggled a little bit. Valdez is struggling. It becomes kind of a numbers game here. I mean, where's everybody's heads at with Scaroller nearing a return to Baltimore? Are we excited about that, or are we a little concerned about what's going to happen, Jesse?
Well, the Orioles might try to delay his return.
Right, I was going to say, I think we're going to see some flare up. That's had a setback in his rehab.
Yeah. I mean, the thing I will say about this is the struggles of the bullpen definitely does compromise the Orioles' ability to keep both of these Rule 5 guys throughout the entire season. That is definitely, I mean, so much of the Orioles' bullpen flexibility is reduced by having both Rule 5 guys on the roster, and especially given the fact that they aren't generally multi-inning guys. These are guys that throw one inning and then are basically done. So that combined, a really good and effective bullpen, maybe you can hide these guys an entire season, but especially with these struggles of this bullpen, I don't see how this is a sustainable formula to keep these guys, other than injuries and deferring the problem and punting the problem away to a later date. I don't see a formula for how to make it through with both of them without drastic changes to the bullpen.
Yeah, I don't know. I've not really necessarily seen anything from either one of them that has me super intrigued. I know Scaroller had kind of a moment earlier in the year where it was that changeup of his that was really interesting.
Struck out Aaron Judge and everything. We all got excited.
So I mean, maybe that's still there, but I think you need to make some roster decisions here. It's getting a little bit dicey because the starting rotation just is what it is. Maybe Dean Kramer bounces back a little bit. Maybe Keegan Aiken can be more effective or something like that. But you're not going to have 5 guys that can go 6 or 7 innings every time. It just ain't happening. So,
and then beyond that, later this year, we're going to have the Wellses, the Lothers, the Baumanns, all these guys knocking on the door and needing opportunities. And some people are going to have to get axed.
Yeah, so we'll see. We'll monitor. I'm sure he'll get several more rehab outings first before the Orioles have to do anything too drastic.
Yeah, and I mean the other light note to kind of like be thinking about too with all of this is how is the trade deadline, and how all of these kind of forces impact the Orioles at the trade deadline and the roster construction and everything like that, especially with Harvey struggling a little bit more. His stock might be declining a little bit, especially if he doesn't put together some good starts. We still have a long way to go before the deadline, but and then in terms of the bullpen, Valdez is definitely, I think, a potential trade chip if he is pitching well. Not that the Orioles are going to get a ton back for him, but he's an old guy. There's a lot of team control. He's a very cheap option for a major league team, so I can definitely see other major. So maybe a little bit down the line, the Orioles try to resolve some of their roster flexibility issues through trade. So that's a possibility. But it's going to be hard to do that if we don't have guys that are performing, if Cesar Valdez is not pitching well, if Sean Armstrong or guys like this are not pitching well in the pen.
Yeah, I think these next 2 months, it's definitely a time to watch the bullpen because there are some pieces that you'd hope would be easy to move, but right now I don't see that happening, but it could definitely change. Another minor move to kind of talk about. We touched on it last week. Rio Ruiz was DFA'd, and it's official. He's no longer a part of the Baltimore Orioles organization. He was claimed by the Colorado Rockies and is currently with their AAA outfit, the Albuquerque Isotopes. So, big things for Rio.
It's quite a name.
It is. minor league teams have some cool names. The Orioles don't really have any cool names in their minor league system, but I think the Cubs have the Modesto Nuts. I like that one too. But yeah, Rio Ruiz is gone, guys. How are we feeling?
I have nothing to say about that.
We kind of talked about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear it wasn't working out. It hasn't worked out, and
it wasn't working out coming out of spring training. We all said it wasn't working out. We established it wasn't working out, and then it didn't work out, and now it's kind of working out because he's gone.
Yeah, and he's going to another organization that's rebuilding, so I think he's probably going to go to a similar situation where he's sort of a stopgap. Hey, you can come up, play a little bit, but you're not the guy of the future, and I think that's just sort of the player that Rio Ruiz is, unfortunately for him. But,
yeah. I mean, he definitely has to make some adjustments with the bat in order to have any sort of chance at major league stability and playing for a few years.
I mean, yeah, he's kind of opened up his resume. He can play a little second base, and that does lower the offensive bar a little bit. So yeah, I think it's possible he gets to the point where he can play a major league caliber second base, but not for the Orioles, not in 2021. Okay, let's talk about the thing that's sort of become taken on a life of its own on Orioles social media, the Orioles catching situation. It's become a bit dire. Eli, you said earlier that Pedro Severino can't catch a ball normally, let alone a change up 3 to 4 feet outside. Orioles catchers have not been too effective this year. I'm on Fangraphs, and I just sorted by, position groups by team. And the Orioles have the third worst catching group in baseball. It looks like the Marlins and the Angels are the only two teams with less valuable catchers behind the plate. But Francisco in particular has kind of drawn the ire of Orioles fans. He was kind of billed coming up as an offensive first catcher who you just sort of hoped his defense would come along. This year he's batting 145 with a 243 on base percentage and a 177 slugging, while also playing slightly better defense than Pedro Severino, actually, according to some metrics, but still not exactly Gold Glove caliber. Whereas Severino has been the better hitter of the duo and starts most games, but defensively, I think, even though he caught John Means' no-hitter this year, I think a lot of fans have started to kind of lose their patience with Severino behind the plate. So I don't know, Jesse, maybe I'll go to you first about the catching situation. What do you sort of make? What should the Orioles do? Do you stick with these two? Do you go with just one of them and go to AAA? And if you do, who in AAA are you kind of eyeing up? What do you make of the situation?
Yeah, well, it's definitely a big problem for the Orioles, especially this young team. It's really important to have a catcher behind the plate, especially for a young team and a young pitching staff. It's really important. Obviously, catchers, shortstops, kind of center fielders, these are the key positions on the diamond, and so much of everything runs through the catcher on the infield. So, no, I mean, it's definitely a problem. Of course, especially with the Orioles this year, defense for catchers needs to be the absolute priority. Even if you're a competitive team trying to make a playoff push, you probably concern yourself a little more with the offensive production of a catcher. Where the Orioles are at right now, the offensive production of the catcher really doesn't matter much to me at all. The problem is the defensive production of the catcher matters a lot to me, and none of that is happening right now. I mean, both catchers are really kind of frustrating, especially in the last year. Severino kind of established himself more as a hitting first catcher, which is fine, but it's not exactly where the Orioles are at right now. We don't need a hitting first catcher. We need a defensive first catcher. And the fact that we don't even have a good defensive catcher as a backup, that's a giant problem too. Because, I mean, at the bare minimum, if you go with sort of an offensive first catcher, usually that is complemented with a defensive first catcher backup and or vice versa, right? But the fact that the Orioles have two offensive first catchers So we have no defensive catching prowess. And in addition to that, our offensive hitting catchers are not hitting, right? So basically, I mean, Chance Sisco is really not providing anything to us. I mean, you have at this point with Sisco, I mean, it's getting to the make or break point with him. Like, but in terms of Severino, just because of the track record, you hope that maybe something comes together for him a little bit. But you also expect that as a veteran catcher at this point in his major league career, he is not having the defensive struggles that he's having, and he doesn't have the defensive regression that he's having. So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a big problem, and I think the Orioles need to find somehow some defensive first catcher somewhere because this can't continue all season.
I will say Sisco, somehow he's throwing runners out, though. He's throwing out 2/3 of base runners, while like the league average is like 1/4 of base runners. So that's kind of come out of nowhere for him because that's typically been the area he's really struggled at. So right. I don't know if he's just getting lucky there, which he probably is. It's nine stolen base attempts. He's thrown out 6 of them. And there's that.
Yeah, I mean, runners might have been too aggressive, more
aggressive.
There
it's Chance Sisco back there.
Yeah,
just
right,
go.
Right, exactly. Right. So, but in addition to that, the other metrics for him, are concerning, right?
Yeah, he's a bad pitch framer.
The pitch framing in particular.
That was one thing I was going to point out, right? When Severino originally came over, he was a glove first guy, and he was one of the better pitch framers in the game. He is grading out as the worst pitch framer in the game of baseball right now, even worse than Chance Sisco. Mm-hmm. And Chance Sisco is hitting at a clip where his OPS is 21, right? The average is 100. So the average MLB player is almost 5 times more productive at bat than Chance Sisco is, right? Pedro Severino is only at 77 OPS plus. Yeah. And that's a guy who the last 2 years has been a 96 and a 93. Right, he was a legitimate offensive weapon from the catching position. Catchers normally hover around I think it's 75, 80. So right now he's about a league average catcher with the bat, and he's this god awful pitch framer. We were joking he can't catch the ball, but John Means' no hitter was a perfect game if not for a drop third strike. Right? We do. Don't get me wrong. It's a dumb rule. So, we've talked about Pedro Severino not being able to catch it. He is the worst pitch framer in the game of baseball for all catchers getting any kind of regular time. He's a liability back there, and I agree, usually one is complimented by the other or whatever, but they both suck right now. And it's at a point where it's really infuriating. And like Jesse was saying, stability behind the plate for a young, inexperienced pitching staff, as we have guys cycling through, coming up, making MLB debuts, you need somebody you can rely on back there, right? You cannot have somebody who, somebody's scared to bounce a pitch for that third strike, right? They need to be able to have full faith and confidence that if I'm executing a 1-2 curveball down in the zone, I can bounce that thing and my catcher will collect it, throw the ball to first base. There is just about nothing more important than stability behind the plate for young pitchers, and we are completely lacking it.
And in terms of the pitch framing, I mean, the difference between a 1-2 count and a 2-1 count because Severino or Sisco behind the plate takes a strike and makes it a ball, right, and doesn't present it well to the umpire. This can also be just like errors in the field behind a pitcher, right? This can be very frustrating and very grating when you're dotting the corner, right. and it's not being called strike.
Yeah, you don't need young pitchers working any harder than they have to. And, you need them focused on executing. And, as long as they execute, whatever needs to happen for them after executing should happen for them. You have to put them in that comfy, cushy spot where they don't have to completely take control of the game, right? They just do what they're supposed to do and it works out. That being said, to your point of what do the Orioles do about this situation, I say absolutely nothing. I mean, I'm not married to Chance Sisco. I'm fine with getting rid of him, bringing Austin Wynns up. If anyone's ever heard of the Birds podcast, we'll shout them out. They're doing a great job. They keep throwing out on Twitter, Austin Wynns' batting average is now up to 326 in AAA. He's hitting the ball well. We do know he's a stable defensive guy. He has been for years. I'm not mad at that. Like, I don't think that Chance Sisco is ever going to come around to being an MLB quality starting catcher. I think, he's had his opportunities and he struggles. And that is what it is.
Right. Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I mean, I think the obvious person to go to would be Austin Wynns. The issue is there's no other catchers on the 40-man roster, so they're going to have to make a move. And I would imagine the move would be to cut Chance Sisco or to DFA him and maybe you squeeze him through and you get him back to Norfolk somehow. But yeah, something's got to be done. I think Austin Wynns would be the obvious move.
I mean, the other thing with this, of course, is, right, would Austin Wynns be starting? And if he is the backup, yes, it is good if 1 or 2 days a week we have Austin Wynns starting instead of Sisco. But if Severino stays the starting catcher, how much difference is this move like this really going to make?
I think you let him play and you see what happens. And maybe Wynns becomes the guy you go to more often.
Right.
Taylor Davis is down in AAA too. He's played in the big leagues with the Cubs, not for very long. I think Wynns has actually played in the big leagues longer than him, which Wynns has not played in the big leagues that much, so that's not too inspiring. But yeah, I mean, I think the focus has got to be on pitching development, and even if you think that Austin Wynns makes you a minuscule amount better, I think that's what you've got to do, because the ship has sailed on Chance Sisco. He's not going to become some great hitting catcher.
Right.
It's not happening. All right, now we're going to get out of the major leagues and talk some minor leagues, because that's where sort of the silver lining, as we kind of alluded to earlier this week, is down on the farm. We're just going to run through each of the levels and their records real quick. The AAA Norfolk Tides are 7-14. The AA Bowie Bay Sox are 15-5. The High A Aberdeen Ironbirds are 14-7, and the Low A Delmarva Shorebirds are 15-6. This is kind of reflective of sort of where the Orioles' talent lies at the moment. Norfolk is a little bit thin, not a lot of guys that are of interest up there, and the ones that are actually hurt at the moment. Whereas Bowie is currently stacked. Aberdeen has a bunch of interesting names there, and Delmarva's offense is like insanely good all the time. I don't know if you guys have anything to say on that, but it's just sort of interesting, and I think it is exciting to see that, all the talk has been about developing this pipeline of talent, and it's actually kind of showing itself in this first month of the minor league season.
Yeah, fully agreed. Like Tyler said, the Bay Sox, Ironbirds, Shorebirds, the lower levels of the minors are where you really see the talent of the Orioles system. AAA is just kind of a revolving door of guys that, the pitchers were sending up and down. Poor Ryan McKenna just constantly on the bus back and forth. So, we expect them to be a little bit worse, and our high-level talent, I think 4 of our top 10 prospects are in Bowie right now. Mm-hmm. Kind of, you could say 5 because Michael Bauman's he's there right now until he rejoins AAA. And, that is Grayson Rodriguez, DL Hall, and Adley Rutschman, who are our top 3 prospects, all just chilling at AA Bowie. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and Rodriguez just got promoted, I think, earlier today, as we're recording this. He started in Aberdeen yesterday, and that was his last start at High A, and now the Orioles are really going to be pushing him. I think there was some expectation he would have started the year in Bowie, so it's not too surprising to see him go promoted so soon. But, it sort of feels like 2023 is kind of the year that things are going to start to click in Baltimore a little bit.
Yeah, and I think the other point that's really exciting is, aside from Norfolk, it's this avalanche of talent that we have coming up to the major leagues, and they're all clicking together at the same time. They're all playing very, very well, aside from Norfolk, and and this is definitely, barring some major disaster, this avalanche of talent should make its way, at least some of it, up to the majors, and the Orioles should, see some results from this.
Yeah, and I even think Norfolk has some upside there, because Jahmai Jones has been hurt for a while. Zach Lother's struggled, but he's better than what he's shown. Ballman's gonna be back, like you said, Eli. So I think Norfolk probably will be better than this. But yeah, it's they're kind of the extra major league guys that sort of fill the gaps, and the major league team's not that good, so it's not too surprising there.
And all of these teams are winning 2 out of 3 games, and Bowie's winning 3 out of 4 games a day, or every few games. So
right.
I mean, these aren't 5-10 winning percentages. These are really, really good winning percentages.
Absolutely, and it's only a month. It's small sample sizes. We were talking. Some people are overreacting to Adley Rutschman not hitting 350, and he's still crushing the ball. Things are on track.
I just need to cut in right here. If you ever hear anybody say that Adley Rutschman is not hitting well, they're out of their minds, right? His weighted runs created plus is a 158 right now. That means by that measure, he is hitting 58% better than the average player in the league. Like, the dude is destroying the ball. He is drawing walks at a ridiculous clip. He's hitting bombs. Anyone you hear, and I'm saying this because I have heard it, anyone you hear saying that Adley Rutschman is not hitting the ball well is outright wrong. And that's all I have to say about that.
And look, it is Double-A, so, those numbers are probably lower in the big leagues, but still, he's also a catcher. Like, put it all in context and perspective. Like, if he was hitting like this in the major leagues, he would be basically the best hitting catcher in Major League Baseball.
He's also going to be a better hitter when he gets to the major
league.
Right.
And the other thing I need to say about this is I think he played 19 games in 2019. Right. He sat out last year. And so this is like the first month of baseball that he's played. Really played professionally. He skipped A. Like, I think he only played in rookie ball and then went to low A. If I remember right, in 2019. Yeah. And
I think so.
Yeah, and so, he skipped high A, he's starting out in Double-A, and he's hitting the ball extremely well. Like, I'm not hearing this nonsense that Adley Rutschman is not playing well at Double-A right now.
And also, I think another important thing to remind yourself of is, like, okay, he's also a catcher, and the defensive value he brings is also a huge part of what he will be for the Baltimore Orioles.
DL Hall has actually been shouting him out. Like, says he loves pitching to him.
Okay.
I've seen that a couple times.
No, yeah, it seems like everybody's kind of clicking down there in the minors, and I've noticed at Camden Chat, I can look at the stats for the website, and it used to be like if you analyze something at the big league level, like you were like, oh, Anthony Santander's hitting the ball really hard, and this is why he's successful, whatever. If you read some article about that would get the most hits. Nowadays, it's like the minor league stories get all the hits. All the clicks, so that's really what people are interested in, and I get it. I'm kind of in the same ballpark. But one player that's kind of he's not really a highly regarded prospect at all. In fact, he went undrafted last year, but he's currently crushing the ball. Now it's down at low A Delmarva, so take it all with a grain of salt. But J.D. Mundy, the Shorebirds' first baseman, currently has a 205 WRC plus. Now, Eli, you were kind of putting the outline together today, and you sort of brought him to our attention. Like, I had read his name and I knew about him, but I hadn't really done much research on him. So, what are your thoughts on Mr. Mundy?
Well, see, what's really hilarious here is I'm usually the guy on this podcast who's done the reading on these guys, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. I know nothing about this guy. Fangraphs does not have a scouting report on him. He wasn't on their draft prospects board last year. There was not even a perfect game grade and scouting report from him coming out of high school. I know nothing about this guy. He went to Virginia Tech and then he transferred to Radford. He hit 13 bombs for Radford last year and the Orioles signed him. That's all I can tell you. But he's hitting 354 with a 488 on base and a 631 slugging. He's just demolishing the ball. I mean, outright demolishing the ball. And I am anxious to learn more.
Yeah, and he's listed at 6 foot 210, which means he's probably 5'10", 235 or something like that, because that's typically how that goes. But no, I mean, I think we don't know anything about Mundy, but it's cool that a guy that nobody really knows about across baseball is playing really well. I'm not even sure how much it says about the Orioles system. I think this could just be sort of a fluky thing, but the draft was only 5 rounds last year. If it was the normal 40 rounds or whatever, maybe he gets drafted somewhere in the 20s or something as a senior sign for a $10,000 bonus or whatever. But it's a cool story. I hope he keeps doing it. And, maybe some miracle happens and J.D. Mundy ends up in Baltimore someday. It'd be pretty exciting.
Yeah, and this is the kind of thing that happens when you have good minor league systems, right? There are guys that kind of emerge through all of it that excel and that weren't on people's radar, and that's the sign of a good minor league system. So hopefully we have more situations like this to come.
Yeah, one thing I want to kind of comment on is, like people always point, and we talked about this a little bit last year when the draft was announced as being only 5 rounds. But like Mike Piazza was drafted in like the 42nd round or something like that, and went on to be this Hall of Fame catcher. When you reduce the draft to 5 rounds, I mean, somebody who was drafted in the 7th round a couple years ago was considered a legitimate prospect, a good talent. And when you reduce the draft to 5 rounds, you're skipping out on so many potential prospects. You're really really minimizing. I don't know. You're just minimizing the possibilities. You're minimizing opportunities for this game to grow. You're minimizing opportunities for young guys to come and get their shot. And I really resent that. And so to see an undrafted free agent coming out in the first month of the minor league season and setting the world on fire, that gets me going. That gets me really, really excited. And it makes me, super anxious about the direction that baseball is going, trying to kind of eradicate the minor leagues, for lack of a better term.
Right. I mean, look at the Orioles roster. You could argue their 3 best players, Trey Mancini, Cedric Mullins, John Means. None of those guys were drafted in the first 5 rounds. Right. Mancini was an 8th round pick, Mullins a 13th round pick, Means an 11th round pick. Right. Not that the MLB is talking about making it 5 rounds every year, but they're talking about making it shorter than the 40 or whatever it normally is.
I think it is 5 again this year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think it's 5 again this year, and they haven't said for 2022.
Yeah, it's not long enough, not long enough at all, and it's just such a clear cost-cutting measure above everything else. So it's disappointing.
And in conjunction with that, I mean, the other thing to point out is, especially if the draft is going to be less rounds more indefinitely in the future, teams are going to invest less time, resources, and energy into the draft. So there are guys that aren't even going to be properly scouted to be given a chance to even be eligible to be drafted in the 5 rounds, really. So that's another part of this too, is just not only are people not having opportunity, but they're not even going to have the opportunity to be looked at in order to be potentially drafted in the 5 rounds.
Right. Absolutely. No, I get not making it 40 rounds, but yeah, 5 rounds seems a bit severe. Some other good news and another sign of a good system is the Orioles are starting to promote some guys. We mentioned Grayson Rodriguez is moving from High A Aberdeen to Double A Bowie. Also already moved up is Kyle Bradish, who was dominant at Double A Bowie. This is one of the guys the Orioles got from the Angels for Dylan Bundy prior to the 2020 season. He's now been promoted to AAA Norfolk and struggled a little bit in his first start, but seems to have established himself as a legitimate prospect with the Orioles.
Yeah, had not allowed a run in Double A this entire season.
Yeah, he was incredible. So, and that's another thing. The Orioles might be becoming a little bit of a pitching factory, which is weird, but I'm all for it.
It's in stark contrast to the great prospects of Dylan Bundy and Kevin Gausman sucking for us. And then Gausman now being a pretty elite pitcher with the Giants. Bundy having a phenomenal year last year with the Angels. Not quite so much this year, but yeah.
Absolutely. Exciting for that as well. And then one other minor league note: the Orioles announced. Now, Jesse, did you bring this story up? Do you want to explain the housing story or no? Okay. Okay. So the Orioles announced that they're going to provide housing for everybody at Double A and below through the month of May, which is nice. Minor league players do not make enough money, do not make the type of money they should given the work they put in. But they probably something they should do for the entire season, or I don't know, unionize the minor leagues and make them a lot more money. They can buy their own. They can rent their own housing.
Well, I mean that really is the big problem, and that really does explain why minor leaguers are really abused in how they're treated. I mean, and the union. I mean, the MLB Players Association is generally speaking a very powerful organization, and the union delivers for the players. And I don't want to draw this giant contrast between what the union is and what the players are. The players make up the union,
Right?
But the fact that the minor leaguers don't have and are not unionized. It is deliberate. It is due to the efforts of Major League Baseball to keep this cheap labor force working. But I mean, we definitely need to keep an eye on the minor leaguers and kind of the welfare of minor league baseball players, because they kind of are the lifeblood of Major League Baseball. Even though players don't, a lot of them won't ever make the major leagues. All major league players were in the minor leagues at one point in their career, and I mean, it's MLB, Major League Baseball is dependent on a vibrant minor league system, let alone, as we've kind of talked about on the show before, all the benefits of minor league baseball for local economies, for people, for families in the United States to have to be able to go see a minor league baseball game at a very affordable price and everything like that. So definitely don't want to understate the contributions that minor league baseball players make to baseball, and don't want to understate how important it is for them to be treated properly.
Yeah, so one other thing is I was reading an article about this, and they say that a lot of times minor leaguers will end up spending about 50% of their monthly salary on just renting a room. So the Orioles providing housing for these lower level minor leaguers. And so, this was Double A and below, so it is the guys who need it most. The guys in Triple A probably have had, they probably have slightly higher salaries. They're in the 80 to 100K range. They might have gotten a week or two in the majors where they get that bumped up salary or so. So they're probably in better shape. These minor league guys who are in Double A and below are, probably making somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000.
Maybe.
And spending, and that's right, maybe much less. I've seen down to like $12,000 in a season, and they're spending more than half of this, on their monthly housing. So it's kind of barbaric.
Let alone food and other just general expenses that come along with living in this society.
Well, and that was a whole other thing with the shortened draft, too, is like typically, the longer drafts, there'd be guys in the 7th round, 8th round that get $100,000 signing bonus. Now it was, if you didn't get drafted, the most you could sign for, I think, was $10,000.
Right.
So you're giving these guys $10,000, and then you're going to say, here's $20,000 for this year. I mean, $30,000 a year. Where does that get you anywhere in the country? Very, very little anywhere. So it's ridiculous, and this goes beyond baseball. This goes into the political sphere. Mainstream politicians have talked about this for a long time. How does Major League skirt around these minimum wage disputes with this type of stuff? It's absurd. So stay informed, in the know about this, and you should be just as upset about it as the players probably are.
And this is definitely not the first kind of realm to go into, because obviously their basic needs and general welfare takes precedent. But also, these players are playing under very stressful conditions where it's hard for them to eat and it's hard for them to live. And from a strictly baseball perspective, that is not the environment to create in which for the players to be playing their best, to be able to demonstrate their abilities to their fullest capacity, etc. So
you get a cramp because you were sitting on a bus for 12 hours, right? And then you got to go out there and loosen up in the half hour before your next game,
right?
And
or
then
your back hurts,
right? You finish it and you got to get on another bus and you got to drive overnight, etc., etc. Yeah.
Well, and this kind of made me think of last week. You brought up the Jacob deGrom story of him pitching the minors. I think in that same rehab stint, a lot of times when these major leaguers do a rehab stint, they'll buy like the post-game spread or whatever.
Exactly.
And they were like, oh yeah, Jacob deGrom treated the guys to like a Chick-fil-A spread after the game. It's like, they're professional athletes, and the spread is fried chicken and fries from a fast food restaurant. Like, come on. Get them some stuff that's actually good for their body. It's all just ridiculous and insane. And I get that these minor league teams are basically small businesses that have no money themselves. So it's not their fault. It's Major League Baseball and these multi-million-dollar corporations that can afford to feed these guys and pay these guys. They just don't want to because it hurts their personal income.
And again, I've made this point before, but it's so short-sighted because there are bound to be stars that are not discovered, bound to be Albert Pujols and Miguel Cabreras out there that could have been, that won't be, because the investment in the minor league systems were not present. So it's a very short-sighted play by Major League Baseball.
Yeah, absolutely. So just something to always pay attention to and, make your voices heard. It's minor league baseball's under attack, and it's pretty clear. So just, stay on top of it. All right, that wraps up all the topics we wanted to talk about this week. Before we get out of here, we do want to do the Oriole of the Week. Last week's Oriole was nailed by Brady, of course, DM'd us. And then what was the Twitter username, Eli? How do you say that?
At La Lucha Sigue.
Nailed it. It was Al Bumbry. Was the Oriole of the Week last week. So thank you so much for participating. For those that don't know, you can go on Twitter and just tweet at us, or you can DM us on Instagram or Twitter and let us know who you think the Oriole of the Week is. We'll give you 3 clues, and then you reach out to us with who you think it is, and then we'll shout you out on the show. So this week's Oriole, the first clue is that in December of 2009, this person injured themselves while shooting a commercial promoting the Orioles' 2010 season. They then had to delay spring training by, I think, about 10 days as a result of the injury.
Next one, he played with the Chunichi Dragons of the Nippon Professional Baseball League in 2012 and only managed to strike out 3.7 per 9. Just abysmal strikeout numbers.
Yeah.
And finally, he was the South Atlantic League Coach of the Year in 2018.
2018. Yeah, and that's the league the Shorebirds used to be in. Now they've changed the name of all the minor league leagues again, which is a whole other freaking thing. Who do you think it is? Let us know. Tweet at us, Instagram us, all that jazz. You can follow us at The Warehouse Pod on all of the various social medias. You can email us, thewarehousepod@gmail.com. You can head over to thewarehousepod.com, which will redirect you to thewarehousepod.substack.com. There you can see all of our past episodes, and you can also sign up to our email list, and you'll get the episodes sent directly to your inbox. And if you prefer, you can go to your preferred podcast platform like Spotify, Apple, TuneIn, or anywhere else, and subscribe to the podcast there. And if you're able to, please give us a positive rating. It helps us reach other Orioles fans. Jesse, where can people follow you online?
All the listeners can follow me on Instagram and on Twitter at Juggernaut8678, Juggernaut 8678.
Nice. Eli?
I'm on Instagram at Ginsey55 and on Twitter at Elijah Ginsberg.
Cool, and I am on Instagram and Twitter at _Ty Young and over at CamdenChat.com. Next week, we're going to hopefully talk about an Orioles win. We're not even doing predictions for next week. Well, will the Orioles win a game next week?
I plead the fifth.
Wow.
I'll say yes.
Yeah, I'll say yes, too. We'll talk about hopefully at least one Orioles win. We are going to also get into a big thing going on around baseball about pitchers doctoring the balls with foreign substances. There was a whole big dust up this week, and there's been past allegations against John Means, among others. So we will get into that. And then we'll also give you another little minor league update because I think that's pretty cool, and we want to stay on top of what's going on down on the farm. All right.
So, real quick. All those places that Tyler mentioned, you can follow us, contact us. If you got any thoughts about the MLB's approach to handling, doctoring these balls, if you've got any thoughts about pitchers using them, if you think that John Means touching the inside of his glove right there is the worst thing ever and he should be banned from baseball, let us know.
Yeah. And we'll give you our thoughts, and we'll do a little digging to maybe find out what exactly is going on.
We'll definitely have an interesting conversation about it next week.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's about all we got. Thank you so much for joining the Warehouse Podcast. Until next time, I'm Tyler.
I'm Jesse.
And I'm Eli.
And let's go O's.